So I've got my auto-locking hubs here, 1993 Nissan D21 Hardbody SE V6 4x4. Got my auto-locking hubs. This one here got seized up several months ago. As far as I know, these have never been maintained. So it got seized up. There's a loud knocking sound from the front wheels when I was not in four-wheel drive mode. So I took it apart and cleaned it and oiled it and greased it and all that. And that's what that looks like. That's how it moves. So today, that knocking sound was back, and I'll pull off the other side. I should have maintained this at the same time. Should have taken it apart, greased it, cleaned it, all that. Didn't do it. So now it's locked up. It doesn't turn. So as near as I can tell, it is not wanting to rotate freely. So this is going to prevent the wheel from turning. Unless it is currently in four-wheel drive mode and the axle is turning, then the wheel being locked to the axle is not a problem. But when it's not in four-wheel drive mode, the wheel being seized up in the locked position like this is not good. And so what's happening is the wheel is forcing the turn as I drive, and it's binding, and these little ridges in here seem to be stopping points, and it's forcing its way past those, and every time it does that, it clunks, makes noise. Over on this one, don't know if that's in the video or not, but these have been chewed up. This is the one that's seized up and making that clunking noise, and I drove it way too much before I figured out what was going on. It kind of chewed these up. I think I filed these down a little bit just to smooth them off. It still seems functional now that I got it working again. But yeah, it kind of ate those up because it was having to force its way as the wheel wants to spin freely. As I'm driving, wants to force its way past these tabs. And so it was eating those up. This one, since I heard the knocking noise, the clunking noise, knew what it was, and stopped immediately, I don't think I did any serious damage. So that's great, but it is bound up. So I need to take it apart, clean it, grease it, put it back together, and I suspect it'll work fine. Now, as a test, I could drive the truck without these on here, and it should not clunk. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So, sure enough, no clunking sound when these are removed. So, these are no longer locking the wheels to the axles because they're not on the truck. So, the other hub seems to still be fine. This one is the one that is seized up. So, I'm going to see if I can remember how to take this apart. Alright, so I've cleaned it up a little bit just to remind myself of what the thing looks like without grease. I don't know how clear this is, but it has this blue ring, which is really neat. It's kind of a spring-loaded thing. Right here, if that's visible, there's a notch. I believe, yep, you use that to get started, and you got to pull that ring out. So I'm going to struggle with that, and I'll be right back. Using a couple screwdrivers to both pull this inward towards the center of the hub and upward, it's somewhat come out of there. So now I just need to work it. It's not enough tension that it seems like it's gonna clamp shut and pinch me. And there we go. That's it. So with that out, does it come apart? It does. That's cool. And there we go. Now I suppose all these pieces come apart. All these pieces gonna come apart. I'm gonna try to do it carefully, and then I'm gonna clean all this. Proper thing to do is probably to use brake cleaner. I'm not. I'm going to use a miscellaneous degreaser or mix of window cleaner and vinegar, whatever I have in a bottle, I don't know. And I'll clean it up and grease it and see if I can put it back together. I'm just looking over this thing, trying to see how it goes together, and hopefully have a decent record of how to put it back together. I know this piece, I think this piece comes off. Look at all these bearings. Very greasy. Trying to do this with one hand. Ah, right. Alright, there we go. It's got this washer. And I think this is the part that's seized up. I think this should be spinning inside of this. And so, oh wait, oh it pushes. It compresses. For what it's worth. Alright, so I'm going to struggle with this to see if this comes apart. Alright, so rumor has it that the blue spring was actually the retaining ring that holds all this together, and you remove the blue spring and everything else falls apart. It does not. I guess because it's seized. So I'm gonna spray some stuff. I don't know, got old stuff and new stuff. Or spray some stuff on it and see if I can get it freed up. Alright, I was wrong. There is another retaining spring in there. It's kind of a O-ring kind of thing. Not an O-ring. I don't know. It's a retaining ring. Maybe tough to see. Very skinny thing right around the edge. Now that I got enough grease wiped off of it, I can see that it has a gap in there where I can slide in some sort of pick or something to pry that ring out, and then it's going to fall apart. Alright, now we've got it on the run. I've got this pick under it. I can just work it out of there now. Alright, so that is the point where you need to be careful. Once you work this guy out of there, this thing flies out of here fast. There's a spring. There's the inside gear thing. I don't know if that's meant to come apart or not. It spins in there. I doubt I'll take it apart. I'll probably just clean it as is. That spring, I imagine, will come off of this sprocket, and I'll clean all that up. And there doesn't seem to be anything left in here. Mistakes were made. The ball bearing ring is missing. Some of the balls? All the balls. Well, there's one in there. They're down here. I didn't exactly have to press these out, so I'm assuming they're not in there too great to begin with. Maybe they're only held in by grease. So what I plan to do is just try to put this back together with bearing grease. Hope I can find all the little metal balls. Another one just fell out. That's nice. And hope for the best. I doubt this is a piece that I could buy brand new with new bearings. So if those are supposed to be stuck in there, oh well. Not sure I can make that happen with this, but I can set them in there and temporarily glue them in with bearing grease, put it in place, and hope for the best. Meanwhile, I've got all this stuff in a coffee can with miscellaneous chemicals and getting it clean. Alright, more or less good enough, sorta. Things are mostly clean. I recovered as many ball bearings as were obvious to me, and I'm going to let this dry a little while and then come back and put it back together. I just noticed, number one, I have 25 missing bearings in here, and I have 25 balls here, so I don't think I've lost anything. And also, these things are magnetized, which is encouraging. I assume that's how they were held in the ring, and I assume that means nothing's broken. They just came loose. So some grease and hopefully restored magnetization. I don't know. Everything's going to hold together fine. That's the point. This is the stuff I use to grease the other auto locking hub, and it seems to be doing fine. CRC Stay Lube wheel bearing grease for disc and drum bearings. It says it is a lithium grease, good from -40 to more than 300 degrees Fahrenheit. So I don't know, I'm greasing stuff with it. That's what I'll use for this. Don't wear your good jeans while you're doing this. But as good as new. All the bearings are replaced. They're staying in place. I'm not gonna shake it or anything. I've got a thin layer of grease on there. Just tried to make sure I put grease in all the holes before I put the balls in. I'll grease it a little more. The internet says to don't use much grease on any of this. Apparently if you overdo it with grease, you can cause the whole thing to bind up. So a light, thin layer on everything. I don't know exactly what that means, but that's the goal. Just a little bit of grease. I'm back. It's been a couple days, so everything has dried out as much as it's going to. I was just trying to put this thing back together. I've already greased everything up lightly, and I don't know, I don't want to take it apart now. It goes back together the same way it came apart. But I remember the hardest part of the other one is the spring-loaded nature of this. It has to be compressed into this cylinder enough that you can put the snap ring in place. And the extra hard part, I can't get enough force to do it one-handed, I don't think. But when you push it down all the way, that sprocket thing sticks out the bottom. So I can't just push it down because there's a stopping point when it hits, when this hits the surface. So you can't have it flat and push it down enough to get the job done. So the way I did it last time, as well as I recall, balance it between two pieces of wood such that the rim of this cylinder is there. And then I believe I took something like this and pushed down. Not going to try to do this one-handed, but push it down enough to get clearance to put this ring back in with your other hand. Not easy, but I think that's what I did successfully last time, so that's what I'm going to try to do now off camera. Alright, so that worked pretty easily. Once I got it compressed with one hand on the mallet, I stuck one end of the ring into the groove and just worked it around a little bit. It was pretty easy. I was wrong before. This inside piece does not spin inside the cylinder. This cylinder should spin inside of this once it's all greased up and put back together properly. I think that's how it works. We'll see. So now I'm gonna grease this up, drop this in. Nope, not gonna do it that way. This pretty sure that goes there, and this thing carefully goes there. With the ball bearings, that's what helps it spin. Then this drops into here, and then we have our blue retaining ring on top of that, which I think will maybe land in that groove. Not sure. I think it will. Alright. The blue snap ring was harder than I remembered, but it went in. You just spread one end of it, stick that end down in the groove, and I used a screwdriver just to push it in all the way around, and eventually the rest of it snapped into place. And with that, I think I'm done. This spins now inside the auto-locking hub, no longer seized up. And so as far as I can tell, it's going to work great. Thought I'd make an attempt to explain what went wrong and how this breaks the auto-locking feature when it seizes up. And none of this is documented as far as I can tell anywhere. It seems to be left out of the factory service manual. It's just not anywhere. So it's guesswork. But this piece goes onto the end of the axle. So that's on the axle, and the axle turns. This piece then goes onto here. And so I've already got this one installed in my freshly cleaned, I don't know, what are we calling this? Housing. And so as near as I can tell, in two-wheel drive mode, the way this thing works is this piece that connects to the axle is going to turn until it hits this tab here and this tab here. Gets to a point it just can't get past that, which is fine because in two-wheel drive mode the wheel is not locked to this center cap, and so the wheel can turn around it, around this thing. But if this thing is not able to turn because it's seized up, then the wheel can't turn. That's not said exactly right, because the wheel can turn and does turn because it's got lots of power behind it. This device can't turn because it's locked in right there, and the only place for it to go is forward. And so what it will do is it will force past this tab, making a clunking sound. So this forces past, and this side over here forces past. The wheel rotates until it comes back around to here again, and it will force past it again and again and again, eventually breaking this corner of this tab and this corner of this tab. It'll bend it, break it, and I assume if you go long enough, it'll wear it down to the point that there is no resistance anymore. This thing would just spin because the tabs are gone at that point. So I think that's what happens. I don't know if that was a clear description. Don't know if it's accurate. Don't know if it matters. But point is, you need this whole thing to turn. Just informational. The bolts that hold these on take a 6mm hex and are torqued to around 22 foot-pounds. I've been struggling the past few minutes trying to get one of these installed on the passenger side. Seems to be the proper thing to do is to assemble these pieces into this first and then install this entire thing onto the axle. I was trying to put this onto the axle and this into here and then combine it, but I think what you do is put the spring in, get it seated, put this in with the tabs down, and use both hands, get that in there just like that, and you can see where the ring tabs are underneath the centerpiece tabs, and then you put that on the axle and it seems to mate up really nicely. Alright, so a test drive up and down the driveway in two-wheel drive and four-wheel drive seemed to work fine, so I think this job is done. It's worth saying that the what do you call it, the maintenance schedule says that the free running hub grease should be replaced every 30,000 miles. I'm willing to bet it was never done on this truck, and if it had been done, I wouldn't have had the problems that I had. So every 30,000 miles, probably a good idea to replace the grease just like we did today.